Ideas have consequences. Postmodernism, the philosophy that so many of us have unknowingly adopted, will lead us into the Dark Ages, and the descent has already begun. The necessary outcome of postmodernism is the deprivation of meaning and an offering of nothing in return. It sweeps the rug out from under all of us and leaves us dangling above the void. Man's reaction to adopting this fundamental belief is predictable. He becomes impoverished in intellectual capacity as he seeks to satisfy his most basic urges through cheap dopamine and laziness. In this state, he is weak and defenseless. He is simple and easily manipulated. A brief study of history, even just a glance, would confirm to any of us that when man succumbs to this state, tragedy follows. When man no longer lives by a minimum faith in the power of the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty, he falls numbly into the pit of despair. He is ripe for the taking by a Messiah who promises to give him everything that he desires. To live in such a state is the gravest of all sins, the consequences of which are not some punishment in the afterlife, but a living hell here and now, as the world itself begins to fall apart. The only way to counter such pervasive ideas is through education. Above all else, all men should study two things: philosophy and history. While many of us understand that our emotions are triggered by thoughts and not the other way around, one must wonder, where do these thoughts come from? Is there some motive force within us, or are they just springing out of the ether? While the answer may be unknowable, I would at least like to offer a hypothesis. A man's thoughts are the consequence of the philosophy he embodies. Embodying a philosophy ushers one's thoughts down particular roads that make rational sense if the embodied philosophy is believed to be true. As such, accepting the pseudo-philosophy that is postmodernism necessarily conjures up certain thoughts in a man. Why bother trying if there is no meaning within that trying? Why bother aiming upwards if there is no heaven to be earned? Why bother listening to the words of anyone else if there is no hope at arriving at an objective truth about the nature of reality? If my world is entirely my own, why not make it as pleasurable as possible for me, avoiding any disturbance that I can, even at the cost of deep relationships, deep discussions, and true meaning? Postmodernism isn't philosophy, it's just pseudo-intellectualism. Postmodernism that insists there is no such thing as objective truth, and that all things are meaningless, is an anti-philosophy. It is not a love of wisdom, but a lazy way of using relativity to avoid pursuing true wisdom. And if one begins to think these things, his reality will reflect them. His life will inevitably degrade, and as more individual lives begin to degrade, so too does society itself. Driven by emotion and the desire to satiate his childish whims, man becomes just that, a child, weak, dependent, and in need of a guide. In this state, he is susceptible to manipulation. Therefore, it becomes necessary to engage with true philosophy. Not true in the sense that it is entirely correct or without error, but true in the sense that it is at the very least pursuing genuine wisdom. I am not here to tell you what is true beyond a shadow of a doubt, but only that we become aware of the philosophy that we are choosing to embody and the consequences of embodying it. And how can one make sense of which philosophy to adopt or what philosophy to form if they are unsure of what great thinkers have posited before them? It is only through the study of where we have been that man can ever hope to be able to set course towards a brighter future. Ignorance then becomes a cardinal sin. Ideas have consequences. Ideas make history. Each massive historical event was predicated on an idea, either a very good one or a very bad one. Just look at the results of ideas in the 20th century alone. Thus we arrive at the second greatest of studies, history. Since the dawn of recorded philosophical inquiry, mankind has wrestled with the primordial questions regarding morality and ethics. Questions that in the modern age appear to be reaching a climax that is irreconcilable, where people have begun to give up on debate and discussion itself. To think that this is a new state for humanity is an indicator that one should study history more. For history affirms to us that there is virtually no thought that hasn't been turned into action and had its effect. Therefore, we find instances in our past, in our history, that are so similar to the current state that they give us a predictive power of the future should we not change course. but one can only take advantage of this information if they are aware of it. Without a firm understanding of where we have been, we are each inclined to look for someone to follow, someone who at least appears to know where they are going. And if their vision for the future is one that guarantees us the fulfillment of our deepest desires, we are too quick to cling to it dogmatically. However, those selling us on the idea of a promised land ought to be revered with scrutiny. One need only pick up a history book to realize that this offer has been made time and time again and rarely is ever fulfilled. By studying history, we become wary of the ideas and philosophies that have led to the destruction of civilizations in the past, so we can avoid being destroyed in the future. In this way, the past becomes our shepherd, the stories of our ancestors become our guide. One must study history so that history can be their teacher. By studying philosophy, we create our own that will guide us to green pastures, to the peaks of mountains, and even to the gates of heaven. By studying history, we keep alive the deeds of our ancestors, both good and bad, and we allow the lessons they learned to teach us now without having to make that mistake again. The combination of these two studies is an efficacious elixir, priming any individual to rise from the valley of ignorance, to begin the ascent upwards towards knowledge of higher things and of things that were. I feel as though this point cannot be made at a more precarious time than now. A time where it seems there are fewer people than ever who are happy with the current state of the world. In particular, it is worth calling out those that we look to for leadership, who are perhaps those who have let us down the most. Plato once said, "The heaviest penalty for declining to rule is to be ruled by someone inferior to yourself." And we have declined to rule. We've declined to rule within our own homes, within our minds first and foremost. And instead we've given up discipline so that we could give in to our childish whims and desires. And all of this predicated on some pseudo-intellectual idea that all of this is meaningless. We have forsaken ourselves. We have traded the pursuit of greatness for comfort, and we've handed over powers to those that would abuse them. I will leave you with one final thought. It was Thomas Jefferson who said, "The government you elect is the government you deserve." So what is it that we deserve? Have we fallen so far that this is the best we have to offer? If so, you and I are the ones to blame. Thank you for watching.